Hi everyone, welcome to the Balanced Natural Health podcast, where we share insights from the ancient science and timeless wisdom of Chinese medicine. Information from the old natural ways of healing can support us in leading more beautiful, more vibrant and more vital lives today. In this podcast, I share simple, natural and accessible tips that you can incorporate into your everyday life for more vibrant health and wellness. I'm so glad you're here. Hi everyone, I'm Dr. Maz and you're listening to episode 43 of the Balanced Natural Health podcast. And in today's episode, I would like to talk about these fundamental ideas in Chinese medicine of spirit and essence. So spirit Shen and essence Jing. So together they're called Jing-Qi-Shen, and they speak to a person's vitality and presence, essence, the energy that they bring with themselves. And together with Qi, they form the vital treasures, the three treasures of Chinese medicine, the vital substances that underpin our health, our longevity, how well we move through every stage of life. They have an impact on fertility and mental health, our joy in life. And so many of our practices in Chinese medicine are centered around cultivating and protecting, nourishing these three treasures. So I'm going to share with you a little bit more about them today, and it will help to explain why we practice some of the health cultivation practices that we do. So I'll share those at the end. And these concepts of the three treasures and the Jing, Qi and Shen, they might be familiar to you, but if they're not, I invite you to just let the words wash over you as if I'm telling you a story, because I basically am telling you a story that helps to illustrate why we do what we do. So you don't have to worry about memorizing all the words, but I will share the outtakes at the end and how that relates to different practices and observances that we keep in life. So things like aligning with Mother Nature's cycles, with making sure we get adequate sleep, returning to the root as it's referred to, and breath work, coming back to our breath in each moment, having presence with our thoughts and emotions and attending to those, listening and dropping into an awareness of who we are and what we want and what pleases us and what doesn't serve us, and how we align with those needs and how we honor them. So let's drop into it. So as I mentioned, Jing and Shen together with Qi or energy come together to form the three treasures of Chinese medicine. And these are vital substances that underpin every aspect of mind, body and soul health. And they are reflected, their abundance and vitality is reflected in our daily functioning, but also in our joy and presence in life, how closely we're aligning with our life purpose or our destiny, and also how well we weather life's adventures and ups and downs, and how well we move through every stage of life and recover from different challenges. So having a closer look at the terms, Jing is essence. So Jing is somewhat equivalent to our DNA and our genes. It's thought of as our genetic endowment that we receive from our parents, and is also influenced by our ancestral lines on both sides. So the vitality and qi and spark of each of our parents prior to conception comes together and melds into our Jing. So that is our trust fund, our energetic endowment for life. It's our constitution as well. There's many different ways that Jing can be thought of, and they defy a clear translation into English, but I will share some of the facets. So we have this idea of genetic endowment, we have this idea of a constitution. So for example, someone with robust and strong Jing might get away with burning the candle at both ends a little bit more than someone who doesn't. But fortunately, in Chinese medicine, there's a lot of practices that we cultivate and are aware of that allow us to build Jing within our life as well. So we have with Jing or essence, we have the pre-heaven and the post-heaven, or the prenatal and postnatal. So the pre-heaven essence or pre-heaven Jing is that genetic endowment that we receive from our parents, and the post-heaven Jing is how we cultivate that essence through life. So making sure that we're not burning the candle at both ends, that we're not dipping into our deep reserves of energy, that we're honoring our cues for tiredness and rest, and giving ourselves that, honoring that when we need it. So Jing underpins our long-term health, and how well we maintain our reserves of Jing will affect how well we age and will affect our longevity. So basically we want our Jing to support us through a lifetime. And I'll come back to the concept of Jing or essence again in a little moment, but it's important to share that each of the three treasures share an interrelationship with each other, because this will explain a little bit more about what I have to say about Jing. So Jing, Qi, and Shen all interrelate and draw upon and can support each other. They're connected and they're thought of as varying densities of the same material. So before I go deeper into that, I will just talk a little bit about Shen. So Shen is translated as spirit. It can be thought of as our consciousness, as our soul, as our spark of life. We often refer to someone's Shen as the light in their eyes. So it's the sum total of how aligned they are with their soul calling. It's their presence, awareness, their full expression of self. So each of those three aspects come together for vibrant health in body, mind, and soul. So for example, when we're looking after our Shen, after our spirit and soul expression, when we're living in alignment with our values, our morals, ethics, and what we desire in life, then everything feels more flowing and easy, right? We're not in stress or discord or incoherence with what we want and what we're doing. So then we're not creating tension in the body. We're not draining qi, which means that qi is more abundant. And when we're cultivating our qi, so I talked more about this in episode 41, about how qi or energy is the foundation for our health in many ways. So how well we can receive qi from the environment in the form of air that we take in the form of, say, sunlight or connecting with the earth, how well we digest food and drink that we take in. So the more efficiently we take in and metabolize and use qi for all of our body functions, the more vibrant our health and our response to all of the ups and downs of life. And the more that we can cultivate our daily qi, so looking after our energy day to day, the more we can avoid dipping into our deep reserves, which is our Jing. So our essence is there as a support through life to support us if we really need that extra backup in times of, say, extra trauma or hardship. We do have that backup battery to dip into, but we don't want to be dipping into that regularly because we deplete our Jing, and then that can lead to poor repair and recovery and ultimately poor aging. And I was reflecting on this on my visit to China quite a few years ago. I saw so many people in the older decades being really mobile and getting about riding bikes. Everyone was out doing qigong or tai chi in the parks in the morning, as compared to here, where you see people smashing it up in the gym and doing hardcore exercise that might feel great in the moment. And look, I love it too, but I think there's always balance. So when we overdo the heavy exercise and we don't have the adequate stillness to balance it out, so when we're overdoing the yang side without the counterbalancing yin, like we see in China and similar cultures, we see a lot more yin movement to balance that out, then we can start to drain that essence. We can dip into those deep reserves. And while it can feel amazing to liberate Jing, because it's effectively the equivalent of getting into our stress hormones, into our adrenal hormones. So adrenaline, cortisol, they make us feel invincible in the moment, but they leave us drained and depleted if we rely on them all the time. And that is why I think we see things like adrenal fatigue happening when we are constantly living in that state of hyperarousal, that state of yang, that
culture of busyness that's around us and that culture of smashing it and just pushing on through. And look, I put my hand up. I'm still coming to balance with this because, as I've shared before in past episodes, this was definitely my modus operandi before, to just smash it and push through and ignore the tiredness. But it ended up in full adrenal burnout for me. And this is why it's so important to be aware of these practices and the understanding that they bring us about how to live in balance and harmony with the cycles of life, which is ultimately what the three treasures are about. They're about aligning with the flow of life, with the flow of the universe, with Mother Nature's cycles, and honoring our role within that great web of life that we are woven into. Now, talking about liberating Jing and how amazing it can feel to get a hit of those stress hormones, this is why we might reach for caffeinated drinks when we're having a mid-afternoon slump, rather than perhaps taking a bit of a rest, getting our feet on the ground or our face in the sun, taking some deep breaths, and just honoring our need to perhaps just drop and be still for a few minutes. And also, this liberation of stress hormones is why some people feel amazing after ice baths. So some people are like, yeah, ice baths, amazing. I feel so vigorous and vibrant. But each time we are dipping into an ice bath, we are putting our body into a stressed out state. It's stressing out the yang, or the vital warmth, the spark of life within us that desires to be warm and cultivated. So we are putting pressure on that. And so in response, we have a release of Jing. The body perceives that it's a emergency situation, that Jing is required to get us through. And so yes, we do feel amazing. But if someone doesn't have abundant Jing to last them a lifetime, then I do think we will see repercussions. And in fact, we are seeing that ice bathing can slow down muscle growth. And I think the longer we have the space of time after this spate of ice bathing that has been happening in recent years, I think we're going to see issues with bones and joints and arthritis and joint pain and so on. And we're already seeing that on a smaller scale, but I think it will become more and more apparent. So that is how Chinese medicine explains that dichotomy between how it can feel so good and yet not be so amazing in the long term. So I mentioned that the three treasures can be thought of as different densities or frequencies of the same material or energy in a way. And we know even from modern science that we are fundamentally pretty much empty space. We're just vibrations and frequencies. So even within the subatomic particles, they are mostly empty space. And so when I think about Jing-Qi and Shen, I think about them as condensed or rarefied forms of qi. So you've got qi, which rules all of our daily functions, our posture, our integrity of our body, the circulation, mitochondrial function, digestion, etc., etc. There's more of this in episode 41 if you haven't already listened. And when that qi is condensed, so think of water condensing into ice, we have Jing. So this is like deep storage, and deep condensed qi is Jing. So it's stored in our lower dantian. So dantian means like an energy field, or translates directly as red field or cinnabar field. So our lower dantian is around the area of the kidneys in the pelvic cavity, and that is where our Jing is condensed and stored. So there's a real link there with the Jing, the essence, and the kidneys. The kidneys are ruled by the element of water, and they're very much about deep storage for the winter, deep essential nutrients and substances that will take us through a lifetime. And it's interesting to consider the location of the Jing there at the kidneys because of that relationship to the adrenal hormones, adrenal meaning literally above the kidney, and also the relationship with Jing and fertility and reproductive health. So we have an understanding in Chinese medicine that the Jing manifests in the sperm in men and in the menstrual blood in women, and it also nourishes the fetus during pregnancy. So we have our reserves of this vital substance, and it is used monthly for women in their bleeds and their pregnancies, and each time a man ejaculates. And that's why in some of our ancient health texts, there's some strong suggestions about how often a man might want to ejaculate in order to preserve his health and preserve his genes. So a younger man might be able to ejaculate several times a week, but as say they move into their 50s or 60s, it might be once or twice a month, because each time they do, then they are issuing forth some of their precious Jing. And so that is why in Taoist and other practices, there's also cultivation of the semen, circulating that energy. So it doesn't mean no sex, but just maybe not letting go of that sperm and that vital Jing. And I will note also, while it might be tempting to think that skipping periods would be a way to conserve Jing for women, that's not necessarily the case, because that would mean defying the cycles of nature, which is really at the heart of Chinese medicine and Taoism, which underpins our Chinese medicine thought, and which the three treasures come from Taoism as well. So we're very much about aligning with nature's daily cycles, monthly cycles, yearly, seasonal cycles, and going with the flow of our monthly cycle. And having a bleed is a really important way of honoring that and allowing our body to move through the flow that it wants to. And it also provides us with a valuable health check. So just a little caveat there, that it doesn't mean skipping periods on purpose. One other perspective that I'd like to share on Jing before we move on to Shen is that I do see that there's some correlation between the ideas of telomeres and epigenetics with regard to our Jing, our essence, and how we cultivate it over a lifetime. So in modern medicine, we have this understanding that the chromosomes within our cells have little caps on them called telomeres, and they've been likened by some people to the little plastic bit at the end of your shoelace. And over time, these get reproduced in blurrier and blurrier ways, and they become frayed. And there is a direct relationship to aging and the quality of our health between the length of the telomeres. And it's been found that the quality of the life that we live and how we cultivate our health can affect the length of our telomeres. So practices like meditation, for example, have been shown to positively affect telomere length. And even within the field of epigenetics, which many of you might be familiar with, so this is the idea that our genes are not set in stone, but how we live will affect how those genes are expressed. So this is very much in alignment with the idea of Jing. So how we live will depend how the blueprint that we came into this world is expressed within this lifetime. So it's interesting to see that what the ancients knew many thousands of years ago and have been practicing for millennia is now being remembered by modern science and just rephrased in different words. But the outtake from modern research as well is that it's living in moderation, it's looking after our nervous system and emotional health, so looking after our qi effectively and making sure we're not spraying it off, tying ourselves in knots in various ways, because we know that our emotions are energy in motion, and if we get stuck in emotional states or unhealthy emotional expression or suppression, then that is a big drain of our qi, which, as we know, qi and Jing are connected, and then that can tax our Jing and tax the expression of our cells and our health through our lifetime. So moving on from Jing, we'll stop briefly at Qi. So the vital treasure of Qi, or energy, is thought of as our daily savings account. So as I've touched on, all the various body functions and structures, integrity, and so on. And so our Qi is dependent on our daily inflow and outflow of energy. So this is why we make sure that we leave a little bit in the tank at the end of the day. We don't go hell for leather and drain ourselves, or we don't expect our bodies to perform without adequate sleep or rest or fuel. So things like improper fasting, or not eating enough, not giving ourselves enough nutrients, not getting enough rest at the appropriate time, and that means the hours before midnight are the most restful according to the Chinese medicine clock. So living in alignment with nature's cycles allows that qi to be replenished every day and allows us to not dip into those deep Jing reserves. And the qi as a vital treasure is said to be housed in the middle dantian, the middle energy field, and that is located around the chest, so around the level of the heart, even though it is very much linked to digestion as well, so digestion, breath, circulation. And then moving on from qi, we move up to the shen, or the spirit, or present awareness, consciousness, our connection to all that is. And this is housed at the third eye, so in the cavity of the skull. And if we think of qi as water and jing as condensed water, as ice, then we can think of shen as steam, as the super etheric counterpart of qi. And in fact, there's some people that describe shen in a broader sense as that which is beyond what can be defined in terms of yin and yang, or that which is beyond the terms of what can be defined within our material world. So in a way, it is the infinite field, the 0 point field, the source of all that is. So in that way, we are connected to the grand ultimate source of all. So it's our connection to the heavens, where Jing is our connection to the earth and our ancestral inheritance. So in Chinese medicine, we have this idea of the triad of heaven, man, and earth, where us humans are the conduit between heavenly energy, or energy from the cosmos, but also that means connection to the quantum field, to the grand ultimate field, to the 0 point field, the field of all possibilities. And so we connect that heavenly energy with earth energy. So we are grounded upon the earth. Our feet have an important acupuncture point that connects us to the earth. So we allow for that flow of energies from heaven to earth. And that is what the sages, the ancient sages, believed that that was part of our mandate, or our purpose in this life. And I've heard it described when speaking of Shen that it is like a mirror that is grimy, and as we bring mindful awareness to how we live, how we speak, how we feel, how we talk to ourselves, even within our own minds, then we can start to clean that mirror. Or I like to think of it as the Shen, or the spirit, is like the light within a glass lantern, and the lantern is covered with all of different, say, projections and learned patterns of the people that raised us, the society that raised us and that we exist in. But as we get to examine those and we get to polish away the untruths, we come back to the bright, shining essence of who we are, and we find, I think, more joy and peace and contentment. And we get more clarity about coming into alignment with living our soul purpose here. So that is another aspect of both spirit and essence, or Shen and Jing. And actually, the two words Jing and Shen are often used together in Chinese language. Jing-Shen to describe the vigor of someone, or their presence, or their full expression of themselves, basically, of the unique presence of who they are. So that combination of our earthly endowment, our genetic endowment from our ancestors, and that spark from the cosmos, that spark of Shen, that spark of the divine, of the infinite within, they meet together. And then it is up to us how we choose to align with those whispers of who our soul and our essence is calling us forward to be. So how much we align with living our lives in a way that makes our soul sing, and ultimately in a way that feels good, because our body, minds, and souls are always communicating with us about whether we are in alignment with the flow of life or not. So we get symptoms or messages that let us know that we have perhaps veered off course, or we're swimming upstream, or in a slightly maybe non-ideal direction. So we will get whispers. We will maybe feel great in certain situations and less great in others, or maybe we'll feel energized when doing a particular hobby or job, or going to a particular place, and feeling less so when we go to another. So it's about allowing time for slowness, stillness, and reflection, for all of that input to be considered, so we can actually respond to what is most aligned with us. And this is why I believe at the heart of many of these three treasure cultivating practices, we have stillness, we have what is called coming back to the root, which can be lying down upon the earth or in a horizontal position, but coming back to stillness so we can come back to the essence of who we are and get a sense of what we want to manifest in this world, what we want, how we want to align with our soul purpose. And slowness is the other component that we see that's common to many of these preservation practices. So, stillness and slowness. And this is explained in looking at nature and seeing that animals that tend to move slowly through life have a longer lifespan. So, when we think of a turtle which moves in a more ponderous way, especially on land, then we can see that they have a beautiful long lifespan. Or even elephants, which can move quickly but tend to move more slowly and harmoniously, gracefully, ponderously as well, then they also are blessed with a long life. Whereas animals that scurry to and fro tend to have a shorter lifespan. And this is something that we seek to emulate with slow, mindful movement, linking breath as well, breath and intention in things like Qigong and Tai Chi. So I think this is especially important amidst the hectic pace of modern life and the modern society that many of us find ourselves in, where it can become normalized to just keep rushing and speeding. It's ever more important to find time to slow down and to still cultivate that stillness and slowness, especially so these days. So, before we finish up with some simple practices that cultivate the three treasures, I'd like to leave you with a visual perspective on Jing-Qi-Shen. And these three treasures are often taught as a candle. So, the interplay of the different elements of a candle reflects the interplay of the three treasures with each other. So we can think of the Jing or the essence as the wax part of a candle, the stem of a candle. So some people have a lot of wax, some people have less, but how judiciously we use that candle will depend how long we get to have that candle flame in our life. And then moving up the candle, we have the flame. So this is the Qi component. So Qi is very much about the act of metabolism or transmutation, changing from one format to another. So the flame is the Qi component. And then the light that is given off from the flame is the Shen. So the interplay of our essence, our energy, and our soul is what gives us the light that lights up the world and lights our way in this life. So, looking at some practices that we use to cultivate the three treasures, one common thing that we see across all of them is this bringing back to balance and harmony and alignment with the Tao or the path. And that basically just means alignment between and balance between yin and yang. So, especially in this modern world where so much is yang, where we're working hard, we're working out hard, we're maybe partying and socializing hard and doing all of our activities, then rest and stillness is so vitally important. We need a balance of the two. And this features in Chinese medicine thought, in Taoist thought, in Buddhist thought, even in the Yoga Sutras. One of my favorite sutras talks about the balance of effort and ease in poses and in life, in everything that we do. So this is why I feel that meditation is so important. So this doesn't have to be a huge undertaking. You don't have to necessarily sit for half an hour twice a day, although that is lovely if you have the capacity for that. But even just 1 or 2 minutes several times a day can be a really powerful way to come back to the stillness, to come back to the root of who you are, and just to come in contact and have a bit of space to consider what is going on for you in that moment. Sometimes we might have to barrel through our day, and so emotions and impressions and expressions get suppressed and we don't get to feel these things, and then they can come out in different ways. So even just setting an alarm on your phone for 3 reminders throughout the day to just come back, put your hands on your belly, let your feet drop into the earth. As I mentioned before, we have a beautiful acupoint on the base of the feet, the kidney channel that connects us to that earth energy. So even getting your feet on the earth, or your whole body on the earth if you can, and just allowing stillness, allowing the breath to come and go. And that brings me to another point, and that is our breath. So we talk about the balance of yin and yang, and a really immediate way that we can cultivate that balance in every moment is our inhale and exhale, because our breath is the yin and yang of life. It is the ebb and flow of the cosmic breath within us all. So bringing awareness to how we're breathing. Is there softness and spaciousness and expansion around it? Is there a balance between the inhale and the exhale? So often when I observe people who are stressed or in fight or flight, or maybe up in their minds, then there's these short, sharp inhales, like, and then not really much of an exhale, or there might be a big sigh at the end of it. Even just practicing that breathing made me feel anxious, and it can actually trigger that sympathetic nervous system response, that fight or flight. Conversely, when we then allow for a longer exhale, we start to bring balance back to the breath. And that's why when people are running through life, or there's a lot going on, it can be helpful to practice a breath where the exhale is slightly longer than the inhale. So you could even incorporate this into your daily little mindfulness checks throughout the day. Just a minute of breath work or breathing where we bring our awareness to the breath, the cosmic chi entering through the nostrils, dropping down into the torso, into the belly, and then leaving, exhaling. So that ebb and flow, and looking for a balance between yin and yang, between effort and ease. And maybe if we have been taking those short, sharp breaths, then allowing more time for a complete exhale. And you'll find that even just a few breaths of this can already start to drop you into a more parasympathetic state, so into a state of rest, digest, repair, and heal. And this is the state that then allows for a lot of cellular repair, recovery, maintenance to happen. So the more time that we can spend out of that activated state and in a state of healing, then the more robust and vibrant our health, the less we dip into our reserves, and the better we move through age. So then through the various decades of life, then that has a direct impact on longevity and aging as well. So another practice that we bring a lot of importance to is sleep. So making sure that we have those hours of rest, of stillness, of returning to the root. In Chinese medicine, the yang qi, so the yang is the animation, the motive force, the dynamic counterpart, that starts to rise at midnight. So we want to make sure that we're well and truly in a deep sleep hours before midnight, because if we're not, we will have a shallow sleep. We'll say that yang will already start to rise and pull us out of deep rest. So 9 p.m. is a great time to aim to be asleep by. This allows time for a lot of important functions to take place, a lot of repair and preparation for the next day, charging up of the qi, the daily battery. On that note, another important practice is leaving 20-30% in the tank at the end of the day. So not running ourselves absolutely ragged to the finish line, but making sure that we leave a little bit in the tank so that we're not dipping into our Jing, our essence, those deep reserves that are lasting us a lifetime. I mentioned that humans are seen as the conduit between heaven and earth, and heaven and earthly energy. So Qigong is a beautiful way to connect to these flows of energy and to bring stillness and balance and slowness to our busy lives as well. So I've got a few simple Qigong moves on my YouTube channel, and there's some interspersed throughout my socials as well. But basically any movements in which we ground our feet on the earth, we turn our face to the sun or to the cosmos, and even simple things like scooping our arms up to collect the heavenly chi on the inhale, and then on the exhale bringing that chi down and rooting that chi into the earth. So even just a few rounds of long, slow, deep inhale, arms up, arms meet at the sky, and then exhaling down and imagining roots sinking into the earth. That can be deeply calming. It can help to collect the mind, the Shen, if there's anxiety or listlessness, depression or fogginess, or maybe emotions that are dimming how we feel or dimming our joy and engagement with life. This can be a really helpful way to integrate all of those energies. And another important piece, and this is looking after our daily energy, is the cooked and warm food and drink and chewing well. So this looks after the chi, the middle energy field component. It means that we're putting in more energy from the food that we assimilate and not using it all up on digesting raw food, which is hard to digest, less bioavailable, and it just leaves us in a better energy balance, better state. So we're not drawing upon the Jing, and we have more Qi to nourish the Shen as well. So I hope this has been interesting and insightful. And I find that these understandings about the three treasures are a helpful way to explain some of the practices that we do and to keep us mindful about how we move through each and every day and how we move through our lives, and maybe honor the messages that we might be getting if we do need to have a period of rest. And I say this to myself, I'm still learning this one. So thank you so much for joining me today. Please feel free to share with someone who you feel might benefit, and I look forward to seeing you in the next episode on the next full moon. All the best.